Okay, greetings everyone. Um, Very excited, very thankful to make this video right now. In some way, this will be the first, episode or relatively new step in the direction that we would like to take. So, as you can see, we were able to get a microphone, we have a laptop, and we have a light, and we have some sort of setup here now to be able to communicate and broadcast in a more aligned way where we're seeking to take this into some sort of good direction. And so for anyone who doesn't know who I am, my name is Gonzalo Safadi Reyes. That is my birth name. Not that it is of much significance to this, because what we'd like to share in this video is essentially I made notes for this video, right? And for some reason, I don't find those notes. So we're going to kind of do an introduction sort of video here where we just like to open a new door, open a new path in our life, in our awareness, in our consciousness about what is it that we are actually experiencing, actually living, and thinking, saying, and doing in our lives, and how are we aligning ourselves with where it is that we would like to be and what vision we have for our life. And so, before we get deep into that, because for each individual, that'll be their own specific, uh, reasoning or justification as to what that may be in their life due to their life experiences. What I'd like to talk about first is really uh, how so we create limitations in our own life, and how our life is essentially, the culmination of our choices. So our present experience that we're having right now is a result of something that we agreed to. And so instantly, with that awareness and the knowing of that, then we can quite quickly jump out of this victim mentality of that we are suffering due to X, Y, and Z, or because this person or this state or this job. Excuse me, it's my first time on a camera as well, like this. I'm trying to get that out of my beard. Okay. So, as I was saying, the first step, in a sense, in becoming and choosing to be truly aware of our life is knowing that at some point we are responsible. And I encourage you to take that responsibility and assume that responsibility in your life, and you will be very much ahead of majority of the world. And so, speaking a little more on the victim or little me mentality, we'll see that basically in our structure of living, specifically in America, for those that were born and raised in the US, but it's not limited to, because each country has a form of government structure system in which its citizens or its people are brought into its way of life, its culture, or its customs. And so, if we look at the modern age we're in, um, whether it is government or religion, which is actually, they're actually very similar in the way they operate, there is this idea of a bigger figure, which if you now say, whether again it be the government or this president or political party, if you agree to that, then you instantly are making yourself smaller. Okay, so when you make yourself smaller, you are now susceptible to certain energies such as fear and doubt and a lower sense of vitality and life and living. And the reason I say that is because if you really think about it, or if you were to really perceive it, a lot of these systems operate based off of that, whether it's taxing your money, whether it's taxing your property, whether it's a major broadcast rule set that you have to abide by, or if a, you know, some sort of government official or cop, right, pulls you over, you are expected to abide by that law, uh, and to that position of power. And so the reason I'm talking about this is I'm actually just right now stating what is the basis of these governments and societies and realities that we exist in. That is just what they would say is the way the world is. But to be very clear, is that that is just one world. Because I'm here to genuinely ask you, if you were to create a world, right? If you had the power to create a world, what would it look like? And would it look like this world that we're living in? All right, so you can sit on that, marinate on that, and reflect on that. What would it look like? Would it have these same structures and laws and enforcers and all of these things, or would it look completely different? And just to be clear, I'm not here to tell you what is right or wrong or good and bad, but that is what these systems in place operate. That is the energy they operate from. So there is constantly a judgment, there's constantly a blame, there's constantly someone in some position telling someone else what to do, how to do, and how to be. And so it's possible that in our life we have found ourselves in those same predicaments because unconsciously we have been a result of these systems because that's what we were born into. Now, I'm not speaking on this to say that you are actually that. I'm here to tell you that you are way more than that. That the limitations that we've placed on ourselves or that we have agreed to. Because when you learn that when you become of a certain age, right, for example, like a child, is in some sort of agreement with their parent that that parent or that mother or that father will take care of them and have their best interest. Is that always the case? No, but let's speak in a way as if it was, right? And so in that same way, that trust has been manipulated in our life to when we become of a certain age and we leave our parents or we start making our own choices without, you know, the need for approval from some sort of guardian or parent. You start making choices, you know, based on you. But the you could actually be made up of all these different systems that have you put in place that you think is you. Okay? So what we're here to do is essentially peel back the layer or layers that have, you know, have helped us feel safe and warm and protected from this world. And so when we go and engage with this world, in order to be who we are, who we say we are, and who we would like to be authentically, it does require the awareness that maybe what I've been brought up to be is not what I'm meant to be. Because these ideals, these ideas of what we think the world is not based on our genuine, authentic experience. Yeah, so also we're not in like a crazy rush. If you're in a rush, then maybe it may be difficult for you to sit here and watch this video, because it's not always about necessarily uh rushing or going fast. Because that also does leave room for mistakes, at least when we're first starting. Just like riding a bike or just like anything else, it requires a learning phase, right? Or what we would say is unlearning, in the sense of um, removing limitations, right? Excuse me. So as we're now seeing, okay, what am I a result of, right? My choices. And what influenced those choices? Was it my parents, or companions, or teachers, or government officials, or politicians, or, you know, all of these things? Now is a good time to start to bring back and take back and reaccumulate your own internal presence, power, and discernment. So it's a good practice when you're making choices in your life to, for a moment, pause and even ask yourself, okay, what may come from this? Or why am I choosing this? Because then we give ourselves an opportunity to connect with ourselves, not just acting blindly on doing something because we feel like that's the next step of life based on what's written in some book or written in the past. So every day is truly, truly a new opportunity, a new moment, a new way of connecting to yourself, to your life, and to, also the environment you're in, and seeing how can this environment or this place that I'm in, if you're in a place in your life that you actually are not interested in being in or you wouldn't like to be in, how can I now, become in alignment? How can I become a contribution to what it is that I would like in my life? And although we are, in a sense, limitless beings, right? Because we exist in a physical body, and then there's also something inside us that animates our bodies, right? And so some people would say on a basic level, on a basis level, that is our heart, right? That is our heart that, even is the engine, right, to this body. And then within that heart, there is an essence that is not necessarily physical, but what we would say is of a spiritual nature. And so when we connect to our true nature, right, our essence, there is sometimes many things clouding the vision of that true being that would like to explore, that would like to create, that would like to animate. And so, I'm not necessarily here to give you a simple formula as to how to overcome all the obstacles in your life. But at least in this video and in this conversation, just knowing that nobody's really an exception unless you have fully, you know, broke through this uh, reality. But there are constant limitations around us all the time, especially if you're living in a world where you do have a job, you work for a company, you live in a city, or you live in a populated area. Now, if you're out living in the woods and in nature, you'll find much less of this, because in nature, there isn't a sense of good or bad, right? We look at an animal that eats another animal, we're like, oh, how could they do that? How could that's good, but that the animal is part of a natural order, a natural ecosystem, a natural cycle. you know if that animal were to think that eating another animal was bad, it would die. Right? It wouldn't eat, it wouldn't be nourished. And so if you really look deeply into the nature, into the elements, into the mountains, into the ocean, into the rivers, into the lakes, into the forest, you will see that there is no good, bad, right, or wrong. Yet we live in a world where you go on you go outside and you are immediately faced with judgment. You are immediately faced with someone else already pointing a finger, or gossiping, or talking about, or something on the news, right? It's like you even go get some groceries, and the cashier's talking to someone else about what's been so bad and what's been so good, right? So it's like that has become a part of that world, and it's important to distinguish, and to, in a sense, for a moment at least, respectively separate these worlds, because we are from nature, we come from nature. Our natural process of being brought into this earth, being born into this world, being cultivated in our mother's womb, is one of the most natural processes there is. And again, you see that in all of nature, how things are born and how things die. And in this world that we are existing in, just the same way that, when I speak about nature, for some people, they'll get it right away. If you spend time in nature, if you go and jump in that river, if you go and um, camping, hunting, nature walks, right? The moment you go into nature, there's an instant drop down of the guard, per se, where obviously you feel the air is fresh, right? You feel the wind. And then we have our world that we live in, where there's houses and buildings and concrete and asphalt. And, you just drive cars all the time. And it's very quickly, sorry, it's not, it's very easily forgotten that there is soil, beneath that concrete. There's soil beneath the asphalt. There's earth under our feet, because the way this world has been created was, in a sense, all right, let's build this house here, and in order to do that, we're going to knock down about 300 of these trees. Right? So there's actually, in this world, there is a lack of respect and acknowledgement for the natural world, for the natural process. And they come in and they create, again, the same way that they just dig out and lay concrete on top of, there has, right, to build these roads and these bridges and these buildings and all these things. There, it's an overlay on top of the real thing. Okay, the real thing is the earth, right? The real thing is nature. The false thing is what we would call is, right, the matrix, in the sense, this world that has been systematically created to keep its components within its limited structure and bounds. Just like how you go into nature, and it's very hard to find a straight line in nature. I'm not saying it's impossible, but even just looking at a specific tree, at a specific blade of grass, a specific plant, it's never exactly just dead on straight like a ruler, right? Such an interesting word, actually, now that I mention it, because a ruler, see if I have one here, right? A ruler is, very straight and exact. And you go to nature and it's not like that. There's even the slightest bend on a tree that may be perceived as extremely straight. But we live in a world that's operated by geometry, rulers. And that's what I'm saying. This is an interesting word because this is used for measurement. Excuse me, this is used for measurement. But then they talk about rulers in history, right? There's like these different rulers of empires or government rulers and things like that. And it's kind of telling you that, hey, the ruler is operating off a certain measurement, a certain system, a certain degree of numbers. And again, that is what has been placed on top of the natural world. And so, just have a brief moment here, but all right, so yeah. So let me shut this off real quick because I keep getting distracted by put this phone on silence real quick. Okay. Yeah. So why would you want to be ruled by anything, right? Like, what part of you would actually like something else to control your choices and your direction in your life? And maybe there is an answer for that, like some sort of safety or guidance. Someone can formulate some sort of answer to that question. But for me, I would not actually like that at all. All right. I would not like for someone else to dictate my life. Because the more you live, and again, from my experiences, the greatest feeling comes from living authentically, living in a way that is not harmful to you. Sometimes we work these jobs because obviously we have things to maintain. We have, you know, rent or children or families, people that rely on us. And so we go and we work this job, and now we're operating off of someone else's schedule. We're helping someone else's dream. Um, because any company, right, who has an owner of that company had a vision to start that company, and it requires some sort of manpower and people to come and help them drive their company's mission. And so, we're constantly, or not necessarily constantly, but is it possible that we're fueling other people's dreams? But what about your dream? What about the things that you would like to do? What about your life? And it's not really selfish in any way. It's actually what every human being is deserving, because every human being is alive. Therefore, that means something inside of them is beating, right? That heart is beating, and that certain heartbeat is a rhythm, and that rhythm creates a song, and that song is an expression of who you are. And so when we're constantly serving other people, companies, we lose that rhythm of our own life. It's like just simply waking up and knowing you have to go to work, so you cannot really do anything else that you would like, whether it be work on art or a certain project or just researching certain things, studying, learning skills, right? Majority of your time is already dedicated to something, and that's an agreement that we make. And so the first step in all of this is being aware of what it is that we're choosing, because I'm not so different. I'm not here to say that I am beyond all of this, but I have come to an awareness to at least to acknowledge and know what I'm engaging in, to know what I am a part of, to know what I'm agreeing to, because I actually do have people that depend on me, right? I do have a daughter, right? And so I do work a job, right? I do work for a certain company. And the reason I'm sharing all this is because I have become aware while still being at this company, right? While still having to generate income and provide, right? I'm right here doing all these things, but I know what it is that I am agreeing to, and it's just for this time being, because again, the first step is being aware. Okay, I'm aware that I'm actually much greater than this position at this company. I'm aware that my skills and abilities are not limited to what it is that I'm doing right now, meaning that I can pursue different paths. I can pursue different skills. I can pursue different um, arts, right? Endeavors. And I can create something. And so, slowly you start kind of taking, what you can from that job, and you take care of what you got to take care of, but don't forget about yourself, right? Don't forget about what it is that you would like in your own life for yourself. And when you do that for yourself, then it starts to become a resource for others as well. And so I'm not here telling you that, you have to quit your job and just, no, you know, but let's see that what are we really doing and why are we doing it? And let's, you know, also start looking at what ideas and what thoughts have made me think that that's all I'm supposed to be doing. From what I've learned and experienced in my own life is that you know this thing we call time, right? This experience we're having with being alive, you know, like this experience of being alive and being able to go places and use your body and drive and walk and run and talk, and communicate and have a family, right? Have relations. And then when I say that, it's not just, a sexual thing or romantic. Everything is a relationship. That's why we say, to all my relations, because we recognize that everything is in constant connection with everything. And we see that in the natural world, right? The leaf leaves the tree, but then it goes to the earth and becomes some sort of layer of protection for the soil, and then breaks down and gives itself, and so, and there's way more, greater examples of that in nature. But we see just from that simple process that, let's say, although you are on this tree, it may be at some point, may be time that you have to fall off of that tree, or leave that tree and go into a different experience, right? Go on to your next contributive reality. I apologize. I'm getting used to looking at the camera, so I know I'm looking down a lot, and it'll get better over time. But this is, again, my first setup, so but again, this thing, this experience that we call life, it's going to keep going, and you don't want to miss it, because you're not gonna get that time back. I've met some really incredible people in my life. I've I've traveled across this land many times, years, coast to coast, different states, different people, different perspectives and perceptions of life and how to live. And I have had amazing experiences, and I have had experiences where that were not so amazing, at least in the time where, sometimes because you don't agree with someone and you're staying at their house, and so then they ask you to leave, you know, and then you have nowhere to stay and you must figure it out. And the thing is that it goes on. I've met some amazing people that I'll never probably see again. And so you learn to cherish those moments, and every moment that you have, that you get to live, that you get to experience, that you get to speak, that you get to be in silence with someone, that you get to, create moments of joy with someone. Even, you know, the conflicts that we find ourselves in are sometimes, they're also temporary. And so there's a deep appreciation for what's actually going on here. But let's also not stay limited in that idea of, oh, that's life, because it can be way more or way less depending on who you are and who you choose to be and the choices you make. So a lot of these experiences in your life are, in a sense, inevitable, because that's going to be the greatest thing that shows you who you are or who you're not. And so, I'm not here saying that, those feelings of sadness are not valid. Those feelings of hardship, those challenges, you know, they're all for something. But what is that? What is it for then? Right? Because then you hear people say, yeah, it's just, it's just it'll pass. It'll pass. Okay, great, it'll pass, right? But so what comes after that passing, right? Let's start to like question our existence in the way of not of, oh, why is this happening to me? But okay, what would I like to do next? Where would I like to go from here? So I don't actually just keep repeating the same mistakes or the same processes that actually aren't really necessary for me to keep making, because the only thing that is in between you and that same mistake is making a different choice. So yeah, that was just really happy to come on here and just talk about that for a moment, just be able to share what it is that, and explore more of what it is that this experience that we're living, and all the things that we give our time to, all the things that we give our money to. Even just today I made a purchase, and after I made that purchase I was like, yeah, I don't really think I had to make that purchase. I'm like, that money could have went somewhere else, you know but what am I gonna be here like, oh, look at you always making the same? No, bro. No, you instantly can, with awareness of yourself and how the moments after you make a choice, how does your body feel, right? What's your capacity, how is your mental? And then you look at those results and you say, okay, so that didn't really go as I thought it would have. Okay, so we're not going to do that again. Good. So you make a little note and you get lighter instantly, because guys or gals, the best way for us to genuinely learn is through our own experience. So, just to be very clear, this conversation, this podcast, this discussion that we're having is always going to be redirected to you and to your life and your choices and your experience, and the things you engage and invest into. And the best thing we can do is start to really become aware of that. And then no matter how long it takes, if you're constantly rearranging, get yourself in order again and keep moving forward, you are going to get one step closer every time to what it is that you would like to see in your life. It has to be, because just as there is, you know, in order to this false world that we're experiencing, again, and I'm talking about the modern world, you know, there's a natural order Just like how in nature, right? Again, like the example I said earlier, you know, we'll look at a animal that eats preys upon another animal, and we'll be like, oh, how can they? No, that's who they are. That's what they embody. And it's actually us who aren't embodying who we are. And so we constantly are judging things as good and bad, right and wrong, because we don't actually have a set uh, alignment and standard of who we are. So we instantly point the finger to external circumstances and trying to reason with this reality that does not have your best interest. you know the energy of judgment, the energy of doubt, the energy of fear, right? Those emotions and energies can all be, in a sense, redirected for you to become more aware, not for you to live in those emotions that will constantly keep you in a spiral, in a downward spiral of living within the limitations of those emotions. So, guys and gals, yeah, we'll leave it at that for today. I think that's a pretty good. Looks like we're at 42-minute mark. Uh, Again, I'm right here. I'm living this experience. I'm living this reality. Each being has their own world and reality. We are all a world, right? So this is me speaking to you from my world, and it is actually up to each and every one of us to create our world. And that is the most fulfilling thing that we can do right now, is start to come from the center of our being and be able to generate, a true capacity, a true vibration, a true experience that can also harmonize with its environment. I've traveled long enough, and have met a diverse variety of people and cultures and traditions that, you think that where you are right now, that's it, but as soon as you go to the other side of the world, you go to Portugal, you go to Spain, you go to Thailand, you go to South America, and you speak to the people there's a whole different world, perspective, way of life that is happening. And so, just know that whatever you're experiencing is just really part of your world, because there's uh someone who's having an amazing time right now somewhere, and maybe you're not, or maybe it's you, right? And then there's people somewhere else that are having a really rough time right now, and to them that's what life is, suffering. And so that just goes to show you that really anything is possible. And as humans, we are naturally, through nature, we harmonize with whatever environment we're in, because that's how we adapt, that's how we survive. Just like how every animal in the forest has adapted to their environment, whether it be now or millions of years ago, or 500 years ago, They were introduced to this environment and they adapted to survive, right? Just like how whether you were born in New York City, you were brought up in an environment and you didn't just give up on life, right? You pushed through the city limits, or at least I did, right? I was born in New York City. I was born and raised in New York City. So, a lot of people will say, that's the heart of it all, right? That's the heart of this matrix, right? So if you could be born in that, and then you could also be born in a beautiful, indigenous tribe in Brazil or Africa, and that's a different experience. And so just know that whatever you're experiencing is just one perspective of what life is or isn't. And you can change that by learning to be more aware of what environment you're in, where you would like to be, and how this environment may be, or how you've had to adapt in order to survive. And then you see, okay, did these adaptations, do they actually serve me, or is it just what I had to do in that moment, in those years, in that time, in order to get to where I would like to go? So there's always a different perspective we can have on our experience. And so don't be limited to think that what you're experiencing is just the end all of everything. It's just a moment, whether it be a year or 2 months. It really is just a moment in time. And so, or whether it be 10, 15, because it's really not even, what is the time thing anyway, really, and how, yeah, how are, is that in a limit in itself? Because, you think you got to do something by a certain time, or all these things. And then if you don't meet that, then it's like, I'm not good enough. I'm not, da, 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 da. So again, there's the many different perspectives. Or you can give yourself a certain time and just go all out. And once that time is up, boom, that could have benefited you greatly. But it can also hinder you depending on how you perceive. So yeah, I think that's a good moment to just let it breathe for a little bit. Knowing that our awareness and our perception is going to influence a big amount of how we're feeling and what we're experiencing and where we are in our life. And so, yeah, if you made it to this point, I would thank you so much for tuning in for a moment and taking, and having the ability to listen to what it is that I have to share. And I look forward to sharing some more about, the kind of the unspoken nature of our existence, meaning that there's many things here that exist inside of us that we can start to really dig up, bring to the forefront, illuminate our path, illuminate our life, and to be able to receive a different perspective on what it is that we're experiencing, so that we don't just fall into a false narrative and a script of what we think life is or life should be based on all these other external influences. So yeah, let's start to move in a good direction, move with more maturity, with a sense of responsibility for our life, and be able to move in a harmonic way as well, that is not based in destruction or falsity or falsehood, but rooted more so in truth. And I am aware that for each individual that may look a little different. Um, and so, I'm very, very careful and aware to not go too deep into the sense of we all have unique situations. But what I'm doing here is speaking on a level that we can all really relate to, which is basically the essence of who we are. You know, because you can choose to be a doctor, you could choose to be an artist, you could choose to be a musician, and you can still have this awareness that you're actually making that choice. And you can do anything. uh, but let's do it with that greater awareness of, not being a result of the limitations that exist all around us. And let us be, a guide to an authentic expression of our life. All right. Thank you so much, Gonzalo here. I guess we'll call this the Primal Sun podcast. And thank you so much. See you soon.